Welcome, everyone, to another episode of Note the Past, a podcast featuring stories from eras gone by. Today, I'm so excited to have Mike Wilke joining us to talk a bit about his musical interests and pursuits, which I think you're going to find very interesting. I know I have. Let me give you a quick thumbnail sketch of Mike's background before we jump in. Mike is a senior consultant and expert with Dell Technologies, having spent about 20 years on high value marketing campaigns all around data protection, and has become very highly regarded in his industries. As I was doing some research, I read a very powerful recommendation that came in that this person said, Michael has a talent for being able to take the most complex technical messaging and boiling it down to business value. That's really high praise indeed, and certainly something that has made him successful with Fortune 500 companies as well as startups. Mike and his family live on the San Francisco Peninsula, and Cindy and I are very fortunate and pleased to have he and his wife Suzette as friends. So after my after my launch of the podcast, Mike sent me a video of him playing guitar, and I was simply blown away. And I just had to have him on to talk about his musical interests and pursuits. So that's why he's here. Welcome, Mike.
Hey, thanks, Chris. Appreciate it.
So let's start about how this all came about, maybe going back to your earliest days. How did you get into music? Spend a little time on that.
Sure. I mean, I was, probably, my earliest recollections, I can remember, the Beatles on the Ed Sullivan Show. And I can remember, in the early 70s, the first time I heard Led Zeppelin and the Rolling Stones, and so I had always had an interest in music, and that's sort of what led me to pick up the guitar around 8 or 9 years old and begin playing that. I never was I never really earned my living playing music. Although I played as a kid in garage bands and in high school, in high school dances and auto dealership openings and through college. So I've I was quite interested in your kind of the theme for your podcast being just sort of music oriented. I guess we have known each other for a while, but never really we're aware of the affinity that we both had for music. So this is a great this is how paths cross sometimes.
Isn't that fascinating when you find out something about someone that you have in common and you didn't know until either of you ventured into new areas and it with each other. So that's great. What about, I'm big and passionate into radio, in my conversation with Ben Fong-Torres about FM Top 40 and the transition to, AM Top 40 and the transition to FM. What about you? What kind of influence was radio when you were growing up?
Well, it was a big influence. I mean, I think initially all of us, were brought up on AM radio, and I could remember, if there was a particular song that I liked, I could remember just waiting for, AM radio stations had a pretty tight, rotation of songs, maybe 20 songs or so, and I would just wait by the radio because I knew, my song was, within the top 10. And so it was a big influence. And then obviously, over time, FM radio became more prevalent, and that gave you the opportunity to get exposed to, a lot more diversity in music. So that was, kind of the early influence. And Chicago, where I grew up, had a very rich tapestry of radio stations, both AM and FM. That whenever you were in the car, that's what you did. You listened to radio. So
yeah, it's you make a great point about the rotations on AM radio and waiting for your song to come along. Even when MTV came out, if you recall, my God, my family and I just waited for Rosalita by Bruce Springsteen. We just wanted to see it, because it was so darn good. So that's a great analogy. How did you decide to pick the guitar, over other instruments? And do you read music? How did you teach yourself? Go into a little bit about that.
Sure. Well, I picked up the guitar obviously for girls.
Love it.
Yeah, I mean, I took, back in the day before we had YouTube, when I picked up the guitar, I did have some early lessons. I I couldn't, and today I don't read sheet music. I can read chords and things like that. But I mean, back when I started playing, if you wanted to learn a song, you basically had the record and you would put the stylus down and, play the part and try to get it right and go back and play it and go back and play it. And, these days, you can, any song you want to learn, you can go to YouTube and just search for it. And there's like 6 or 7 videos out there that will, do all the hard stuff for you and say, okay, here's how you play this riff, or here's the chord progression. So I was essentially, for the most part, self-taught, and in playing with people. I played through high schools, with bands and, everything from, school concerts to auto dealership openings, and then into into college. Played all through college in kind of a folk rock band, and and just always, it was always somebody to jam with, and I think that's how most, a lot of people learn. I do envy people that I have friends that are, I would consider master musicians in guitar. I just envy people that can just, read music and understand music theory and that kind. So I was more interested in just being able to, play rock and roll and blues and that kind of thing.
That's great. That's great. Were there any particular artists or bands that you would count as your influencers?
Yeah, I mean, from a guitar perspective, I mean, there's the obvious ones. It's people like, Jimmy Page, but I very early on was a huge fan of Jeff Beck before, he became, really what he is, what he ultimately became in terms of a guitar legend. Anybody that I felt that was unique. Interestingly enough, even people like Steve Howe from Yes,
Wow.
I thought was, a convergence of rock and, and kind of classical jazz. People like Mark Knopfler. There's always those people that you could just, you can hear them play. And who it is. I wasn't really ever an Eddie Van Halen guy, but that's the kind of thing, right?
Yeah.
You hear somebody play, and immediately you know who that is. So I tended to gravitate to those people just because I thought.
Did you mention to me, maybe in a text or email, that you were also perhaps not influenced, but into Stevie Ray Vaughan. I can't recall whether you did.
Oh yeah, for sure. I mean, and I have some great Stevie Ray Vaughan stories. I I mean, Stevie Ray Vaughan was, you know, it was and it is today a huge influence. Um, he he really revolutionized, you know, the blues scene as we know it today. He kind of got me reconnected with people like Jimi Hendrix, you know, who he drew quite a bit from. So he was, you know, that was a little later in life, but you know, in the kind of mid '80s when he finally broke out. But yeah, just a huge SRV fan.
Yeah. You know,
Um,
interesting. I'm going to do a short podcast, probably just by myself, to talk about John Hammond, the famous record producer with Columbia Records. That guy discovered Bob Dylan, or discovered and signed Bob Dylan, signed Bruce Springsteen, and he came back out of retirement to sign Stevie Ray Vaughan to Columbia Records. So it's kind of an interesting
yeah,
character.
he was. I was working at one point for Anheuser-Busch, Budweiser in Chicago. And there was a huge music festival that happened every year called Chicago Fest. And Budweiser was sponsoring the blues stage. And I was essentially kind of, you know, managing that promotion for them.
Wow.
And we had Stevie Ray Vaughan and Double Trouble on the bill for 2 nights in a row. They were the headliners. So I spent 2 days literally hanging with Stevie Ray Vaughan and his trio, Double Trouble, backstage over that time. And it was like, wow. I remember just like sitting on the side of the stage, you know, watching him going, man, this guy was a force of nature. He had just actually come off of tour with David Bowie. David Bowie actually, I think it was for the, you know, whatever the song, the album Let's Dance was on, you know, yeah. David Bowie heard of him and, you know, he's like, you know, I had to have to get this guy on tour with me. So David Bowie had Stevie Ray Vaughan on tour with him. It actually didn't end up being a good chemistry. I mean, you know, I think Stevie was a little bit more, obviously a Texas blues man, and you know, as great as David Bowie was, you know, he was a little bit, you know, different. So, but he, you know, he came off that tour, and so that was amazing, amazing experience. And then later in life, you know, my son lives in Austin, Texas, and he's been down there about 8 years, and I ended up meeting Stevie Ray Vaughan's older brother, and he, you know, Jimmy Vaughan, who was, you know, had a good career of his own, played with the Fabulous Thunderbirds, but Jimmy Vaughan like lives in Austin. There's a club about a mile away from where my son lives that, you know, Jimmy Vaughan just sits in on Friday nights and plays, and you know, it's like amazing. So I was able to meet both of the Vaughan brothers in my lifetime.
What a treat! What a treat! Staying on the topic of artists and bands, do you have any particular favorites? You know, perhaps a top 3 of your favorite artists or bands?
You know, that's always a hard one to answer. I'm trying to think. You know, I mean, we talked about Stevie Ray Vaughan. I'm you know, I'm a big Van Morrison fan. I mean, there's just so many of them. But I'm still today discovering. Suzette and I went to a concert in the city about a month and a half ago for this Swedish band called Dirty Loops. That you should look them up. They do kind of sort of funk, pop. They do a lot of covers. It's a 3-piece band, although they have 4 just phenomenal musicians. So yeah, I mean, I'm always like up for something new. I get a lot of new bands, even from my kids, playlists and that kind of thing.
Yeah. It's interesting. My family makes fun of me because I talk about my top 50, like top 50 albums and bands, and it's always changing. I say, oh, that's in my top 50,
Yep.
which, probably is more like 200. But Van Morrison's, Astro Weeks, his first album, to me, bar none, is one of the best albums that's ever been made.
Yeah. No, you have sort of, it's horses for courses, right? You have your list of bands or musicians based on, kind of what mood you're in, sometimes. Yeah. And so that's probably one of the greatest things about technology is streaming services that, you can literally, just pull up anybody that you're feeling at that time and get that music.
Yeah. Do you have when you look back, you talked about the concert or the performance that you and Suzette went to, any favorite all-time best concerts that you've ever been to?
I was, early, I had a period in my, and I still like it. I was into a lot of progressive rock. And I've been to a few, Yes concerts were always amazing. Early Genesis concerts were always amazing. They were just so, they were so almost symphonic, So, those are some of my favorite concerts. And then, there's other ones that I can remember, like my first Black Sabbath concert, or the time that ZZ Top opened for Deep Purple. I mean, wow. It's just like, I don't know if I have a favorite, but there are certainly concerts that will always stick with me as sort of moments in my life.
Oh, that's really cool. That's really cool. What about lyrics? I mean, I've seen you play guitar now on 2 videos, and it's awesome. And in fact, if you'd want to share at some point in time where people can, see your clips,
yep.
That would be great. But what about lyrics? I mean, I love music. I'm not a musician, but I'm really into lyrics, and I like to draw, parallels in lyrics to certain aspects of life. Like I used to quote, Pearl Jam's song Indifference regarding commitment in goals that you have in life. But how did lyrics play any role for you in your musical pursuit?
That's an interesting question because, I do a bit of, do a little bit of songwriting, and I always struggle with lyrics. I find it to be just like a totally separate ability. I can string together, great melody line and chord progressions, and then when it comes to lyrics, it's always difficult for me. It's interesting. People like Elton John and his writing partner Bernie Taupin. I mean, he would actually write the lyrics and then give it to Elton John, and Elton John would then write the music for the lyrics. It's almost like reverse. Most people, do it the other way. Like, the Red Hot Chili Peppers, they'll write the guitarist or somebody will write the music and then turn it to the singer to go figure out the lyrics. So in terms of my ability to do that, that's always been a challenge. And I always have such, I hear lyrics and I go, like Van Morrison, it's like, God, where do they come up with these things?
Totally.
They're just like, it's just a whole different way of being wired. So,
yeah, it can be similarly said about the Grateful Dead. I mean, the role that Robert Hunter played in writing their lyrics, the majority of their lyrics.
Yeah, I think there's a lot of bands that had, lyricists that, wrote all that, that people don't realize, where a lot of that came from.
Yeah. I think I got that right, Robert Hunter. If not, someone can correct me.
Oh.
But anyway, yeah, lyrics are pretty darn huge. I saw one of your Facebook posts where you were talking about Bill Walton, who, as you know, recently passed away, and understand that you actually met him. Can you talk a little bit about how that happened?
Yeah, it was just a random meeting. It's funny, but with Bill Walton's passing, the other day I was moved to get back. I was just listening to a bunch of Grateful Dead because of his connection with them. No, it was. I remember it was in New York. I think he was either with the Celtics at the end of his career, maybe just just retired. And I was walking out of a restaurant and he comes, like celebrities oftentimes are, don't want the attention. Well, Bill Walton comes walking in, he's 7 foot tall with a tie-dye t-shirt on. And I walked up to him and I said something like, "You're Bill Walton." And I thought he was just going to walk by me. And he goes, "Yes, I am. What's your name?" In that Bill Walton voice. And I didn't know. I said, "Michael." He said, "Well, nice to meet you, Michael." And I just remember leaving that just, that kind of paths crossing, thinking, man, this guy is a character. And he, I really expected him just to not even acknowledge me. I just remember, what a nice guy. And when he passed away, my mind just immediately went to that, that time when I, crossed paths with Bill Walton, and he was everything that people said he was. He would just talk to anybody. And I remember saying he must have had tens of thousands of interactions like that, so I just thought it was kind of, it was just a remembrance of a guy that I thought, was, walked to his own drum, which it was hard for a lot of people to do, but he was just unapologetic in the way he kind of led his life.
Well, the articles have just been replete with people talking about what a great guy was, how he treated everyone individually.
Yeah.
Wonderful basketball player, obviously, and clearly a huge Deadhead. Mickey Hart had some great, the drummer of the Grateful Dead, had some great things to say about him. Apparently, I guess in his autobiography, he wrote about having attended something like 859 Dead shows.
Yeah, which is
phenomenal.
Amazing that he even had time for that.
Yeah.
While he was, playing basketball and/or doing broadcasting.
Hey, I wanted to share one of the articles about him and talk a little bit about sort of the connection of music and life themes and get your perspective on it. In this recent New York Times article, the essayist wrote, Walton also seemed to perceive other pursuits in terms of the dead, above all playing basketball. Quote, the music and the basketball were the same thing, according to Walton. You have a team with a goal and a band with a song, and fans cheering because they're happy, but also to make the players perform better, faster, and to take everyone further. Walton continued, during the game, during the song, everybody goes off, each in their own direction, playing their own tune. But then, with the greatness of a team, the greatness of a leader, and the willingness to play to a higher calling, they're all able to come back and finish the job together, to win the game and send the people out into the night ecstatic, clamoring for more. I just thought that was incredible. How does that resonate with you, and perhaps any of your broader, life themes or interests?
Well, I mean, I can certainly see the correlation there. I mean, I know, as a musician, when you're playing with other musicians, you talk about the groove, kind of getting, you just know when, you're all on the same page. And I imagine that's kind of what he may be talking about in terms of the similarity to playing a team sport. So, and playing live in front of people is just really it's its own high, and so I can again imagine how being a professional athlete in a stadium full of people cheering, would be similar to that. So, but I think in my business career, I think particularly now at my stage in my career, the idea of working in a team, working with a lot of diversity, backgrounds, age groups, and that kind of thing, and finding, an equilibrium with all of those is, it's still pretty exciting. So I mean, I think, in Bill's own inimitable way, he kind of connects the dots between those two worlds of music and sports.
Yeah, well put, Mike. Just well put. I've thought about the same thing over the years. In music, you have themes around team, around leaders, around impact, around commitment. All of the things that we experience, and to try to teach younger generations in our business careers. I certainly know that was a focus for me. You certainly have now shared that. It's funny. Neil Young, my favorite, has always said, "It's all one song." And I think that he taught in terms of his own music. And I think that that's a similar way to put it about music and themes of success and ability and results within the business environment as well. So I thought it was a cool connection, and I wanted to get your thoughts on it. So
Yeah.
thanks for sharing that. All right. So what's up next in your world of music? I mean, you're pumping out these great little 1-minute video clips, which I love watching. But what's up next for you? Where are you going with this?
Well, as I look towards, retiring at some point, but I mean, to be honest with you, I'm having so much fun. I don't know when that's going to be, but I mean, I think one of the things I look forward to is, is doing just some more recording. I mean, the technology today and the things you can do on a PC or a laptop are just amazing. And, just being able to, on my own, kind of create music. And so that, that's something that's out there. I continue to, I'm a bit of a guitar collector. I do, I'm always looking for a guitar. I mean, here's an interesting story for you if we got a little bit of time left. So I was the first guitar I ever got was a really nice guitar in high school. It was a Gibson Les Paul in Chicago. And 3 years later, I traded it in for another guitar. So that happened, I was in college when I traded it in. So maybe I was 20 when I traded it in. So fast forward to like 2 years ago, a friend of mine, through another friend who I didn't even know, saw an ad on Facebook for a music store in Portland, Oregon. It's a fairly well-known store for kind of collectibles. And this friend of a friend reached out and said, "Hey, I think this is your buddy Mike Wilke's guitar."
Oh, wow.
And the reason he knew that is because they had a picture of the guitar, and then they also had a picture of the case. And on the back of the case, I had M. Wilke stenciled on it.
Great.
And so I looked at it, I said, "Can this be possible? Is this the guitar I traded in 50 years ago up in Portland?" So I contacted the store, and I said, "I believe that's my guitar." And I asked a couple questions about it. And I said, I got to get that back. It was considerably more money than when I traded it in, as you might expect. But and the owner of the store said, "Well, I already had somebody who has spoken for it, but let me ask them." So he goes back to this guy, and the guy hears the story, and the guy goes, "Absolutely, he's got to get that guitar back." So I ended up flying to Portland. I have some pictures I can share with you. After 50 years later, and they weren't quite sure how this guitar made it from Chicago out to Portland, Oregon. They knew where they got it from, but beyond then, it was identical. I reacquired this guitar some 50 years later, and now it's back in my collection. So every time I tell that story, and in fact, the music store, Thunder Roads Guitars, posted that, and it just got like overwhelming response of people just going, "Wow, that's really a cool story."
That's an incredible story. I can't wait to see the guitar.
I will.
You gotta show it to me.
That's the nice thing about it. One of the nice things about having some success in life is I can actually, when I was a kid, I would just go into guitar stores and just stare at the wall about guitars that I couldn't afford, and now I can afford, not all of them. Some are. But
to have your original guitar reappear in your life, I mean, that's full circle.
Yeah, no, absolutely.
I mean, that would be like me being able to get my first skateboard or my first Flexi back, which I would love to do. Well, Mike, this has been fantastic. We have just tipped the iceberg, and I think now that we have this connection, it really is an opportunity for us to get together, perhaps more often, to talk about music and to get a little more in depth. Suzette and Cindy will join in with their stories as well.
Yeah,
I want to thank you so much for coming on today and sharing your experience and your passion for music and the guitar.
Yeah,
really appreciate it.
I appreciate you dredging up some old memories. That's that kind of
all right.
Making me
Take care. We'll talk soon.
Okay. Bye, Chris.
Bye now.